So Sam, when was the first time you heard hypertrophic cardiomyopathy related to your own situation?
The first time I heard was in my 20s, seeing a cardiologist. Earlier, I'd been diagnosed with something called IHS, idiopathic hyper something.
Idiopathic hypertrophic subaortic stenosis, the old name of HCM.
Yeah. I was diagnosed with that at age 13 when I went for my sports physical to play football in junior high at the age of 13. So going into seventh grade.
What year was that?
84, 85, somewhere around there. And that was at Riley Children's Hospital in Indy, which is highly respected children's hospital. And I was sent there from my local doctor who picked up on a heart murmur. Had been my family doctor all along, was the high school's athletic doctor. So he was looking for sports stuff and found a murmur and thought we'd better check this out before I approve you to play sports.
So we're going to dig into the rest of that story on this edition of Tales from the Heart, a podcast from the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association. And these are our patient segments. So in this podcast series, we are talking about real life, real patients, and kind of digging into their stories a little bit. These aren't meant to be one-off podcasts. We'll come back in future date, talk to Sam again about how things have evolved. So you get to meet the cast of characters, so to speak, and you get to watch their stories evolve, not only in video podcasting, but also on our website where you can read more about Sam's journey and see some photos of he and his family. Sam, thanks for taking some time today to talk to us on Tales from the Heart and about your HCM experience. We know that you and I have been both going down this path a long time. Not only did the year have a 19 in front of it, but there was a 7 or an 8 for me and an 8 for you. So we're back in the 70s and 80s. They're calling us idiopathic hypertrophic subaortic stenosis. I was 12 and they made me pronounce it. So I'm like, yeah. And then I sounded really smart when people asked me what was wrong with my heart. I'd say idiopathic hypertrophic subaortic stenosis as fast as I could.
And that is a conversation right there.
And they would just look at me like, you're going to break, like you're going to die. And I'm like, no, I'll be fine. And in the back of my mind, I always thought maybe I will drop dead someday. But teenagers are so responsive to your emotional needs, right?
Right.
So tell me about your experience with your early diagnosis.
Well, the early diagnosis was rough. I'd been playing sports all along. Grew up in Indiana, you play basketball. That's a big thing, part of what we do. So that was ripped away from me. So that made it really rough. I tried to hang in there with staying active with keeping the clock and being a team manager, fixing football equipment, different things like that. And my dad was a football coach. So that made it even harder. People didn't understand why I wasn't doing something. That was rough going through high school with that.
That is a really interesting extra stressor. Your father's a football coach. There's expectations of you to follow dad's vocation probably. And in the 80s, that wasn't possible.
Right. And to at least be participating, but the doctors weren't signing off on that physical form. So it wasn't happening. And I wasn't I didn't really like talking about it. So I didn't explain to anybody what was going on. My parents kind of did, but I wasn't talking to other kids about it. They just thought I wasn't good enough or didn't want to. That was kind of tough. And then also there was some misinformation about the disease. The way I understood it was I'd be lucky to make it out of my 20s, early 20s.
Mm-hmm. I was given similar bad information.
If I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have studied harder in school.
I often say something similar. I'm like, I made decisions in my youth based on the fact that I wanted to have it all. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a house. I wanted to have a dog. I wanted to have a kid. I wanted to do it all before I died. Yeah, that was the goal. And I think that's a little screwed up. I don't know that was the healthiest way to try to live a life, but it's all kind of worked out for us.
Yeah.
But the world has definitely changed. So let's kind of walk through the abbreviated version, because I know we could probably talk for 2 hours on just like what we've all been through. But in the highlight reel of your HCM journey, what are the moments in your life kind of chronologically that you went through? So you had your diagnosis. Treatment in 85 was like nothing, or a beta blocker. So what was the treatment journey like for you?
Didn't really even take any drugs until my mid to late 20s. Saw an adult cardiologist, moved on from Riley Children's to an adult. And the first couple doctors, well, actually the first doctor wanted to put a pacemaker in, or ICD. I was in denial. I was like, nah, I really don't need that. But then I saw a second doctor and he was younger and I clicked with him better. And he's like, you really need this. And I let him put it in. And about 6 years later, I needed it at 2 a.m. So it saved my butt.
So you had an appropriate discharge of your ICD.
Yes.
How old were you when that happened?
It was February 16th, 2016, just 8 years ago. So early 40s. And I had the defibrillator for probably, I think, 8 years before I needed it. But yeah, obviously it saved me.
You know, I think when people get an ICD, the newly implanted ICDs, and I was one of these patients myself, as soon as it goes in, you're like, something's going to happen. Like it's going to do its thing and it's going to do what it does. And you go a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you're like, this thing is never going to do a damn thing.
Right. Yeah. 6 months was my comfortable period, but I was still uncomfortable having it. I tell people my son knows his numbers so well because I was afraid to use the microwave. They said it was okay, but still. So I had him using it for me for the first couple of years. Yeah. Just
no, the current microwaves are okay. The old ones without the netting, that's the old generation. Yeah. Those are the ones that were problematic, but now they should be fine. Yeah. So your device went off in the middle of the night. Did you know it? How did you find out your device went off?
Oh, well, the first shock, I wasn't real sure what it was, but my heart was still racing. It was like 200 beats. It was something outrageous. So I stood up and realized that's what was going on. That's what the first one was. The second one, I could feel it like starting to come. So I laid back down on the bed and saw the flash of light, heard my dad's voice say, not yet. And then I felt the shock again. And yeah, got up from that. Felt like after a hurricane goes through, everything's just calm and everything felt so much better. So I got up, let my dog out, made sure he had food and water, and drove to the hospital. And then they sent me to St. Vincent for a week to be put on
amiodarone. Yeah. Okay. So you snuck something in there and I'm going to go pull it out. Your dad said not yet.
Yeah.
What happened there?
I just heard his voice. I just say not yet. And yeah, I don't know.
Is your father living or deceased?
Oh no, he'd been deceased for a while.
Did Dad have HCM?
Yes. Yeah, he died at the age of 70 with it. He was diagnosed after I was diagnosed. When I was diagnosed, it set off a storm of everybody getting checked and found the gene. And my dad, being a phys ed teacher, he got checked and found that he shouldn't be doing as much as he was. So yeah, cousins were checked and it set off a storm.
Dad says not yet. Technology says not yet. And that was 2016. What has happened since then?
I've had AFib. I'm on 9 different drugs now, but I stayed active though. Even before that, because of having the ICD, I got comfortable doing more. I felt like I had something had my back in case things went wrong. Before that, I did 6 half marathons, just walking them. But I was in pretty good shape and stayed active. Since then, I've done 5Ks. I haven't gotten back to the half marathon stage, but stayed active with the walking. I help with a local baseball thing. So I'm out there walking every night and doing stuff with that all through the summer. That's been really good.
The ICD, the medication have been basically your therapeutic pathways at this point.
Yes.
No myectomy, no alcohol ablation. You're non-obstructed at this point.
I had to have an ablation when I was in AFib. Yeah, that's been the only thing. But yeah, mostly just through medicine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm on, I think, 7 heart-related drugs now every morning. So, and I believe the future is bright with those, with the medicines. I've been in 3 different studies through this period and over the past 15, 20 years. I've got my own parking spot at one of the hospitals.
You got your own parking spot.
Because you had to go in to get tested every week, I think, on one of them. So we joke about that.
Let's talk a little bit about clinical trials. So you've been in 3 different clinical trials over about 15 years. If somebody were to ask you, like, should I consider being in a clinical trial? Like, obviously you've done it 3 times, but what would you tell other people about your experience and the reasons why you were in a trial?
The reason's easy. It's my way of fighting back. There's been ups and downs to this disease. I find the good in everything, but this is the way to fight back, is to punch back with trying to help find a cure for this for some kid that comes along that's got it too. I'd love for the cure or the perfect therapeutic to come. And I was on part of the mavacamten study for a while, and now my sister's on that drug. My EF drops, I got kicked off, but it made it through and is being used, and I'm damn happy about it.
That's amazing. So you were in the trial. It wasn't right for you, but it literally was right for one of your family members. That has to feel really good.
I hold it over her head.
Okay, that's fair. I did this for you. That's right.
Yeah.
I did it for you. Yeah, that one might be good around the holidays. Like, you can host. I gave you a drug.
Absolutely. Because it really has changed her life. I mean, she is so much more active because of it. I've seen the positive effects for her, and I felt great when I was on it. And every take, and I've seen a difference.
The good news is there's more coming. There's more data. There's second in class drugs coming down that same myosin inhibitor pathway. There's other agents that are going to be investigated, like SGLT1, SGLT2s, more for the non-obstructed. So I've got 2 big trials coming your way soon that you can choose between, actually. I wish we could have everybody do both of them, but you can't do 2 drug trials at once. You can only do 1. So there's going to be lots of opportunities coming up for new trials. And then, you talked about your family and that everybody got evaluated back in the day. Do we know the genetic marker in your family?
Yeah, it's MHY7 or
Nice and heavy chain, MYH7.
Okay.
So the second most common, or I think they're equal, MYBPC3 and MYH7. I mean, their numbers are so close. They're basically equal. So myosin binding protein C has the genetic clinical trials coming up for gene therapy. And now they're really working on the MYH7 mutation as well, but that's a very different technology. It's coming.
Yeah, the future is so bright with this stuff. That's why I keep hanging on to see what's coming next. I mean, and that's why it kind of makes it easy to do these trials for me, because I've already thrown myself out there to make it better and to keep swinging at this disease.
So who else in the family is affected? Your father, your sister?
I have one niece that has it. My son does not have the gene. I've got a cousin who passed away during a heart transplant in her early 40s. I have another cousin that has it and has an ICD, but has not had any issues. And then some cousins that just don't want to know.
We'll have some of those. That gets complicated. Your son doesn't carry the gene. That's got to feel nice.
Yeah.
I'm happy for him.
And he's a good baseball player. So it would be heartbreaking to have had to take that away.
Let's talk a little bit about then and now. You mentioned back in the 80s, your diagnosis sidelined you. And that was appropriate for the time. And there's this thing happening now in HCM, and it's a great thing. We have more data, we have more information, and we actually know that some people with HCM can safely participate in athletics at a pretty high level We even have an NBA player right now and an NFL player. So there are people in that space that are doing high level competitive athletics. However, I want to talk the difference between 1985 and 2020s. In 85, there were no AEDs on the field. We didn't have external defibrillators. They were not publicly available. Maybe the EMS team had them if they happened to be there for recreational or high school level sports, which didn't happen. So there was no AEDs. CPR, we hadn't quite figured out as well as we do today. The training was different. The science was different. Resuscitation science was different. It has evolved. We didn't use cooling at all in the body. It wasn't a thing until maybe you got into the hospital. So there was a lot of things we didn't have. And the easiest way to see then and now is go back and look up Hank Gathers. You can watch it on YouTube. You can see his sudden death. It is all on video. It is heartbreaking. It is devastating. Every time it comes back around and I see it again, I cry for this family. I cry for this man. It was a horrible way to go. In front of everybody, he just falls down and everybody just looks at him. Nobody acts. And then you have DeMar. Monday Night Football, a top quality medical team was feet away. He hits the ground. They're running. Compressions start fast. AED is used. Not that we want people to have cardiac arrest during sports, but if the worst did happen, your likelihood of survival today is so much better than it was in the 80s. So that's part one. Part two is we can risk manage people. If you're at high risk of sudden death, you can get an ICD. If you're not, but you know you have HCM, maybe you're medicated, your heart rate is stabilized, you're taught about hydration, you're taught to look for signs and symptoms, your team knows to look for signs and symptoms, and you can potentially safely participate in athletics for some today. Not for everybody, but for some. So if you're a young person listening to this now in 2024, 25, 26, whenever you listen to this, 80s were different. We've made big strides.
Yeah.
And, if you were diagnosed today, it might be the same sidelining based on the anatomy and physiology of your heart and your risk profile. But it didn't have to be. So how does that feel knowing that we've evolved that much for young Sam, for the teenage Sam?
The Hank Gathers thing really hits me because that's when I was in high school and that was awful. And I named my first ICD Hank after him.
Hmm.
Yeah. And when I first did my first half marathon, I posted something about, I thank Hank Gathers for reminding me to respect this disease and my dad for reminding me that you can live with it. Things are so much different with the AEDs, so readily available. I do a walk every Thanksgiving to raise money to put AEDs in state police cars and sheriff's cars because they're always the first ones there. They beat the ambulance usually, and they're usually at sporting events. Being able and being diagnosed with it so that the athletic director or the team manager, because nowadays also almost every sporting event, there's the high school's trainer is at. Their job used to be a lot more lax and be at the high school. They're at every baseball game or every softball game now. So things have really changed with watching the athletes so much better than it used to be. And every school gym has an AED now. And they've got those. We've got one at the baseball field. I looked at it. They've got it dumbed down to where you can use it even though you are freaking out. That's great progress.
It is. It's such great progress, and we've taken it to the next step, and we're starting to hopefully get this out to be able to be taught and deployed by volunteers around the country coming soon. And that's our Drill Doctor Heart program. Silly name, but it's emergency preparedness for a cardiac emergency. Yes, you can dumb down the AED, but you're still in panic mode. Something
Right.
really big is happening. Somebody might die. Like literally, what's the worst thing that could happen? Somebody could die, right? So you're facing your worst fears, watching somebody die, and you have to respond. So knowing where the AED is part of the equation. Knowing who knows CPR, where the AED is, how to get the AED to the human as fast as possible And if that's calling 911 because it's in the police car, then that's your fastest way. If it's over there in the field, you send your fastest runner to go get it and they come back with it. So you plan who's going to do what in the case of an emergency and let everybody know you will be assigned a task. It's not for debate. It's not for conversation. You will do that task and you will do it well because it'll be a simple task. Go stand at this end of the road, wait for the ambulance, flag them in here. That's your job. Run and get the AED. You're going to start compressions. I'm going to put the pads on. We're going to save this person's life. That's the drill.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, we started this back in 2011 with this concept of preparedness. And my nephew actually helped develop it. He was on the board of the USA Volleyball at the time as well. And he brought it to USA Volleyball and it became one of their policies, not under the same name, but the same concepts. So we've just been talking about it for years and years. And then DeMar happens and we're like, oh yeah, we should make that digital now because it was a PDF back in the day, right? So now we have a challenge going on now. It's May 31st, 2024. So you can check to see if there's an active campaign going on when you listen to this. But we're going to give away 4 AEDs. We're going to give them away to a program that is prepared to do cardiac emergency training, and they can submit their applications and we can try to get more AEDs out there and have a little fun at the same time by teaching people what to do. I think we need to plant you out there in Indiana with all these programs.
I'd be happy to. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun. So you've lived a long life thus far. How old are you now? You hit the 50?
Oh yeah, 51, about close to 52. Yep.
52. Okay. So you're in the 5 club with me. High five. But something really big happened this year to you.
Coming up on the 1-year anniversary of getting married. So yeah, things are going great. It was big. We dated for about 10 years, 9 to 10 years. So I'm slow to get around to things.
Yeah, I would say that's a very patient woman, but that's a whole other story. But life happens. You have a son, and how old is your son now?
Just turned 16.
So you've got a 16-year-old and a fresh new marriage, and life is looking pretty good, but the heart gets in the way sometimes.
It does, because I just don't have the energy sometimes. It kind of helps. She's a cardiac nurse, so she knows what she's getting into.
Well played, Sam. Well played.
Right. Yeah. And that's not how we met, oddly enough. Yeah, we met through divorce church support group, and we were talking, and it turned out we knew a lot of the same people. So
for different reasons, yes.
Right.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
And one of her doctors is the one who originally wanted to put the ICD in me that I said no to a long time ago. So
interesting. I'm glad that your heart, pun intended, has found a home.
Yes.
And a well-placed one with a cardiac nurse. That's funny. That's not in your profile. We got to put that in your profile. Because then you're going to get all like the middle-aged guys going, all right, Sam, how did you score a cardiac nurse? Like, how did you do that? Dating advice from Sam. So what do you want people to know about your journey with HCM? You've had some pearls of wisdom in our conversation over the past 25 minutes, but what else do you want people to know about a journey with HCM?
You can live. Just stay active. Keep living. Don't overdo yourself. Do what your doctor says to the limit that he says it's okay to do. Just stay active. Don't give up. Giving up lets the disease win. So don't do that. Don't ever give up, in the words of Jimmy V. I mentioned earlier, try to find the positive. My positive that I've always tried to find was the normal people take things for granted. I've never taken next year for granted. I didn't know when something was going to happen. So you got to live and make the most of it. And even after I had the cardiac arrest, it was a good reminder to not take things for granted, enjoy every day or every month. That's the biggest thing.
You know, when I wrote my first book, there's a portion in it where we talk about not looking at everything as an ultimate blessing, but not looking at it as an ultimate curse. But there are some silver linings to living they're very slivered silver linings. It's not like a big fat silver lining. It's just little strands that you can pull out. Having respect for this adventure called life, it's not given to everybody and it's taken away from some way too soon. And when you come from an HCM family that's generational, there tends to be some generational grief because we've lost people we've loved to the disease. But I think your dad and my dad were similar. My father was a volunteer fire first aid business owner, loved his golf, loved his fishing, loved his games, loved his life, and knew that he wasn't likely going to live a very long life. But my dad made it to 73 and he left on his own terms.
Right.
He went into kidney failure and said, I'm done with dialysis. So like literally my dad said, I'm ready to die now, which blows my mind to this day. And actually we're coming up on the anniversary next week. You know, to the dads out there, we do watch you. We are watching how you're handling the journey. To the moms out there, we're watching it too. We want you to live your lives. We want our kids to live their lives. And you want to appreciate what's out there. Lessons from the dads. As we're coming up to Father's Day too, I'm just tying everything together here. Tying everything into Sam's story. It's there are silver linings. I got to meet Sam because of HCM, right? I get to meet all these wonderful people who are living really interesting lives with their HCM in every walk of life. And we are everywhere. We are everywhere.
Yes.
So much so, without names, somebody I've known for decades, like 30 years, I get an email the other day. Well, guess what? I joined your club. I have apical HCM. Like, we're literally everywhere. If you think we're weird because we have big, thick, wonky hearts, you might too. You might too. Go get it checked. Oh, last thought. We talked about student athletes. You were a student athlete.
Well, just to 6th grade. I mean, yeah.
We're all student athletes at that point.
Right.
But part of the work that we're doing here at HCMA is to ensure that every child has the opportunity to have a screening for their heart when they're young. We believe should be done through their well child examination, and that every pediatrician should be asking every child about their heart health history and their symptoms, because we don't all have murmurs and we don't all have horrible family histories. We have subtle family histories. Yeah. Grandma had a stroke. Aunt had heart failure. Uncle has a defibrillator. Like, they don't sound connected. They might be.
Oh, the physical form now for high school athletes is so much more. I think it even lists, does anyone in your family have HCM? So, yeah, we are getting attention and it's helping. It's getting kids diagnosed and letting them know that they need to be observed. So yeah, things have come so far with that.
We're going to be talking to lawmakers in your state, specifically Indiana. So if you had the chance to say something to the lawmakers of your state about requiring well child examinations include cardiac components, would you endorse such language?
Absolutely. It's an easy one.
Okay, Sam, any final thoughts for this edition of Tales from the Heart?
Can't say thank you enough to what HCMA has done for us and what you guys do on a daily basis to help us with these new drugs and just the support you guys give for patients. It's been great. You guys have been great for me for the past 20 years, I guess.
Yeah, we've been at this a while, Sam. We have been at this a while. Well, the good news is we're also trying to bring a center to Indiana. So I will be out there a bit more, hopefully in the next couple of years.
Yeah, keep working together. As much as I can help you guys, I will.
Absolutely. We look forward to the partnership. So thank you for joining us on Tales from the Heart.
The Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association thanks the following sponsors for today's podcast: Cyokinetics, Bristol Myers Squibb, BioMarin, Tenaya Therapeutics, and Viz AI.